So welcome to NW6. We were kind of debating how you define the area, and this walk is really around trying to get some engagement between the 5 community centres, 3 on the Camden side and 2 on the Brent side. So people don't have a great idea of what's available on both sides, but I like to see Kilburn as one entity. So it's a tale of 3 boroughs, 1 river and essentially one community. So the purpose of this is to follow the stream, the Kilbourne. Some people call it the Westbourne. It's one of the 3 rivers that rise in Hampstead. The other one is the Tyburn that flows through Marylebone, and the better known one is the Fleet, which you can see the big valley down in High Holborn. But our river here, it's known as the Kilbourne. It was cut through by the railway when the railway opened in 1868 into St Pancras. But it flows all the way down to Paddington Recreation Ground, and where we're going to be finishing up today, actually at the St Augustine, a rather marvellous church. So this is the Maygrove Peace Park. So Anthony Gormley.
It was commissioned by Camden to coincide with the opening of the Peace Park in 1984. It's possible this might actually be Gormley, which he then kind of wrapped himself up round, and that was one of his techniques.
But I like to think of it as one entity in Kilburn, even though there's a boundary down the middle. So this was all the rural county of Middlesex. The boundary was first set up really in the 19th century when Hampstead Borough Council was established. That was part of the London County Council. On the left-hand side, it was the urban district of Willesden, which subsequently became Brent. So we're going to be darting behind through Grange Park and behind the state Kilburn.
He served as a soldier in the trenches during the First World War, and it was his experiences that changed his style of painting. From 1945 to 1953, he worked as a teacher at the London South Bank University. One of the student halls and residences are named in his honour. He often has exhibitions, especially in the Tate Gallery. But the second artist we're going to talk about in this area was a recording artist. And Dusty Springfield was born in 1939 at 87 Fordwich Road, which at the time was a nursing home. Jackie Collins was born there also, similar sort of time.
Okay,
Thank you.
so let's head towards the real path of the Kilbourne, and we're going to make our first stop outside the first of 8 cinemas and theatres. In previous times this was heading into the Middlesex Forest, so it was quite perilous to travel up here. And you can see the Metropolitan Railway came through in the 1860s. We have the Marylebone line, which was opened in 1900, and you've got what was originally the Bakerloo line that opened in 1938, and that's now the Jubilee line. So this is Railway Central. This is a fictitious cinema that was erected in 1956 between these railway arches called the Bijou. Now in the early 1950s there was a film called The Greatest Show on Earth. They were looking to make a film called The Smallest Show on Earth. It's about this couple that thought they'd inherited a big cinema like the State Kilburn. They inherited a place called the Bijou, which is also known locally as the Flea Pit. And they based it here because everything would kind of rattle as the trains came over. Now you're facing a pub called the Black Lion. The Black Lion has got some wonderful plaques in it showing people taking the Kilburn waters, the Kilburn spring. It was built in 1898, so this is one of 16 pubs in the Kilburn High Road. So it used to be known as the drinking capital of North London. 14 of these are still open and quite varied. So welcome to Kilburn Grange Park. Until 1910 it was part of a house called Grange House that was owned by Mrs. Peters. And before the First World War, the Borough of Hampstead and the London County Council bought the land to make it into the much loved Grange Park. But there's a lot of light industry around this area that's virtually completely disappeared now. So talking about light industry, we're going to head back into Kingsgate Road and the path of the Kilbourne, and we're going to make a brief stop outside the Kingsgate Community Centre and the workshops. When it was a very big Irish area with the dance halls and pubs, people used to call it the Dip. So between West End Lane and the High Road, you've got a bit of a valley that forms the Kilbourne. So people tend to think of Hampstead as a sort of well-heeled borough. It was actually very mixed. And at the top there, you see you've got the railway. So the Kilbourne River was cut off and culverted underneath. So lovely community centre. There's a fantastic cafe in there. So many activities here, but you can see nice 1930s example of trying to do something about public health. The Kingsgate workshops, if you look at old maps, this area was a lot of speculative housing was built around here. And there was a sawmill to sort of cut up the wood for the floorboards and the windows and all that sort of stuff. By the early 20th century, it had become a sheet metal works called Barnes and Cole. I'm pretty sure that my grandfather on my father's side actually did an apprenticeship. So wonderful place to visit. 30 or 40 different artisans and artists that work here. Everything from fine art to pottery, furniture. There's a lot of ingenuity and artistic activity around here. So this was the largest cinema at the time, but then two other big ones were built, and we're going to hear a little more about that. Hillman's Butchers on your right-hand side. It's the oldest family butchers in the High Road. It's probably the only place in the High Road now that you can get decent pork and various other Irish products.
Welcome to County Kilburn. It was in the 1970s. It was called Biddy Mulligan's. The name was taken from a character of an Irish comedian, Jimmy O'Day. In the 70s, because it was such a popular drinking place for the local Irish, they would have collections for the IRA in their support. And in 1975, a bomb exploded in the doorway, which caused extensive damage, but no loss of life, thank goodness. And it was claimed by the splinter group of the UDA. They claimed responsibility. Shortly after that, the pub changed names, and it was a pub up until 2009 when the pub closed, and it's now a betting shop. But it goes hand in hand with the huge Irish community here, who originated from the railway works, and really it's gone on to this day, although you've got less and less of it.
Major music and entertainment venue, as well as one of the largest cinemas in Europe. It sat 4,000 people, and the place that we've just passed, the entrance at the back, was the entrance to the old restaurant. And typically a show would involve a newsreel, two major feature films, and an interval and so on. But so many famous bands played here. You know, the obvious ones are like the Beatles and the Stones. But Jerry Lee Lewis was booed here because he married a 13-year-old girl. So just a brief stop here. This is the back of the Kilburn Polytechnic right in front of you. Flats have been built, but the Kilburn Polytechnic opened in 1903, and it was a project by Middlesex County Council. And it was felt that we were falling behind the rest of continental Europe in terms of training our young people. So they also had a branch up in Colindale, which was for dressmaking and cooking. And Kilburn Polytechnic functioned for many years. Okay, so welcome to Charteris Sports Centre. It's run by our friends Lloyd and Clem here.
The Brent shut it, and then Brent were trying to sell it, and we were trying to put a bid together to buy it from Brent, but we didn't get enough money for that. The final guys that won the auction were the school who now run it, but they knew about us already, so they put that partly into their bid to Brent, that they'd give us the community use of it weekends and evenings. Most people walk here, so it's walking distance. Though some of the basketball guys will come quite a few miles. They'll drive here, and it's often a Filipino community for the main participants in the basketball. So it does depend on the sport. The gym is people walking. Well, what does it used to be? We know it was gas meters were one of the things. It was light industrial use. It was bigger, and someone said there was about 200 people working here at one time, because there was an area out the back there which was also used.
So I don't know if you can see across the high road there, there's an interesting sort of fascia. This is B.B. Evans. The third phase of Kilburn was really, it was the drapery capital of North London. It had its own department store. There was a major fire here in 1910, and that features on the poster that you might have seen. Someone's just asked me about the course of the Kilbourne. So it comes out of Kingsgate Road, and as we'll see, it comes out at West End Lane, which is an old medieval lane that ran all the way down. So facing you now is Sacred Heart Church, founded in the 1880s by the Irish Oblates, because they wanted to make sure that their Irish workers' spiritual health was looked after amongst the pagan English. And it's become a very important Catholic church, currently used by a lot of Filipino and Polish people. But at one stage they used to have something like 8 or 9 masses on a Sunday. So we can see that we're here in the Borough of Hampstead. This is a lovely restored plaque here. This is a local resident of Kilburn Vale. He's talking about the flood of 1975, when there was something like 1.5 meters of water. There was a cloudburst over Hampstead. West End Lane got washed out. You can see it was kind of a country lane that leads out to the high road there. And there's a rather lovely pub here. And our friend informs us that they've just been given planning permission to take it down, which is a great shame. But there's what was a lovely plaque outside marking the high point of the water, and of course, being Kilburn, someone's nicked it. Facing you can see some letters up there on the left-hand side. So that stands for the London General Omnibus Company. They had something like 400 horses stabled here. There were horse buses running here from every few minutes into the West End. It took 12 horses to keep a horse-drawn bus on the road for a shift of 14 hours. This is the Ebenezer Chapel, and it's recently been restored. It was built in the 1870, and it was erected by Margaret Creswick in memory of her brother Thomas Creswick, who died in 1868, and he laboured amongst the sick and the open air in Kilburn, and his last sermon was delivered on a bridge near this spot a week before he fell asleep in Jesus. On the left-hand side is the Priory Tavern. There's a lot of local mementos about A.A. Milne, George Orwell and various other people that lived around here. My family claim to fame is that when my grandfather got married in 1930, he knew the landlord's son, so he spent the night before his wedding, like any good Kilburn boy would, in the Priory Tavern. So here we are, site of the Kilburn Wells. It wasn't only Hampstead, Happy Hampstead, that you went to take the waters. People took the waters in Kilburn. And I mentioned the copper plaques in the Black Lion. There's actually people taking the waters at threepence a glass. Apparently it tastes pretty gruesome. Okay. So let's cross the high road very carefully, walk down Cambridge Avenue, and then we're going to hang a left at the bottom for St Augustine's Church. So, as you can see, this area is being redeveloped, but this was built in the 1870s. It was built by Father Kirkpatrick, who walked out from St Mary's Abbey Road, and he took most of the congregation and all the money with him, and they built this huge place. It was the largest church structure outside of St Paul's and Westminster Abbey in London, and you look at the size of the tower and you can see that. It was consecrated in 1880, and but the spire wasn't completed for another 18 years. It was designed by John Loughborough Pearson, who also designed the Fitzrovia Chapel, which is what's left of the Middlesex Hospital. Viscount Rothermere, who lived in the area, he set up the Daily Mail and the Daily Mirror. He actually donated 3 Titian paintings to this church, and 1 Titian was stolen, so they sold the other 2 off because it was too much of a security risk. But rather a magnificent building, and you can see that the Kilbourne runs here, and it runs behind underneath Paddington Recreation Grounds. So we hope you've enjoyed the walk, but now I want to announce tea and cake in the church, and there's an opportunity to have a look around and look at the wonderful rose window.